Hey everybody, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm having a blast taking these amazing, legendary, isolated vocal tracks. I'm doing a vocal analysis, a vocal tutorial, and I'm also talking about the recording process. Next up is Tony Lewis. The band is The Outfield, and the song is called Your Love. Now, Tony's no longer with us. He passed a couple of months ago, so this is sort of a eulogy to him. And I'm gonna also talk about other voice types and similar voice types. But before we get started, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe to my channel. That'd be really cool. I have a singing course, and the course is called How to Sing Better Than Anyone Else. You guys can find it right here at KenTamplinVocalAcademy.com, where I also have a free singing forums with over 20,000 people discussing how to get great at singing and talking about all these other great singers. So now I want to talk about Tony, and this is going to be a pleasure for me because I've been wanting to do this for a while. Tony has a very unique voice. Now, some people would just call him, a tenor. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a little name to kind of slap on it. Hey, he's a tenor because he sings really high. But that's actually not the case. He actually is kind of more of what's called a countertenor or contratenor. It matches the female contralto or like a mezzo soprano. Okay, so it's in that vocal range, and usually somewhere about an F sharp to a G. Well, it's kind of a G3, and some people talk about G4, but a G3 is their lowest range. But they hover, their tessitura, or the sweet spot, so to speak, of their voice is right around about an F sharp 4, G4 here up to about a D5. So hey, or hey, like right in that range is where they sort of excel in their tessitura, or the sweet spot of their vocal range. Now, this is important because not only that, there's a lot of characteristics and qualities about this kind of voice type that are very unique. Let me start off with what those are. Now, when you hear him sing, and I'm going to A-B him next to some other singers, I'll discuss who they are in a minute, you're going to find that it's kind of like a little boy's voice, okay? And you listen to him, you go, yeah, I can see that. Almost as though when he went through puberty, his voice never maturated into adulthood, okay? That sounds kind of weird, but stay there with me for a minute. Usually voice types like this, because female vocal folds are about half to 3/4 the size of men's, so they usually resonate and their voices sing in a higher pitch or a higher timbre in a pitch. Now, this is true for countertenors or contratenors, which is, like I said, they reside in the female register of like a contralto or a mezzo-soprano, etc. Now, this becomes very interesting because there aren't a lot of voice types like this. Now, we know from the Vienna Boys Choir, they used to do something horrible back in the day, and they used to go, you won't be needing this anymore, to a lot of the castrati back in the day. Now, some people think that Dimash is a castrati and all this stuff. That's not, I don't believe that, because there's too much girth and too much manliness to his sound in his lower register and also when he goes up. Whereas guys like Tony have a smaller sound. Now, the sound is what's called sobre in bel canto, or in opera sort of language, right, in vocal fox. And what sobre means is light, bright, young, agile, and kind of small. And like I said, young. Young is the key word here, where it kind of sounds kind of like a little like Michael Jackson, where he kind of, he went through puberty, but he still sounds like a boy, okay? But there's still a little bit of manly qualities to his voice. Now, I'm going to fire him up here in a minute, but I don't want this to be confused with some other voice types we're going to talk about in a second. So let's just fire up Tony's, the song Your Love, Tony's premiere song, what he's most famous for. And here we go.
Josie's on a vacation far away. Come around and talk it over. So many things that I want to say.
Now, before I go on, if you notice, there are some other qualities to his voice that are also very specific and particular to this voice type. Usually, because the sound is so small, whereas a bigger voice is a lot more forgivable in pitch, a smaller voice like this, a contratenor or countertenor, has to be very spot on their pitch. They can't waver at all because it's very noticeable that their pitch is getting off, okay? And so most of them don't have vibratos, or they don't use vibrato. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions to that, but for the most part, they're very flatlined. Josie's on a vacation far away. How to think it over? So many things that I want to say. right? It's very, I don't want to use the word plain, but just very, like I said, there's not a lot of range. There's not a lot of volume to their voice either. It's either kind of on. So there's like two dynamic ranges. It's on or kind of really quiet, but there's no real big, dramatic range to the volume in which they sing. So if you listen to that again as we go through here, I want you to take a particular notice. No vibrato, spot on pitch, very tubular, small, agile, bright, young, right? All the different things that Sobre would bring to a voice like this. Voice type, listen up.
Josie's on a vacation far away. Come around and talk it over. So many things that I wanna say. You know I like my girls a little bit older. I just wanna use your love tonight.
Here are precise as, I just want to use your love. It's so precise. Everything is really precise and small and, like I said, young. Now, I want to talk about some other singers, so I'm going to mute him for a second, and I'm going to go down to my first guy, which is a guy named John Anderson. Now, John Anderson was in a band called Yes. In fact, I liked Yes so much, I even tattooed it on my arm when I was 7 years old. In fact, I tried to do Yes songs with a jail tattoo where I took a pencil, a pin, I shoved it into the eraser, wrapped it around with thread, dipped it in Indian ink, drew it on my arm in a mirror, and I sat there and I tried to imagine how big that looked to someone that was 7 years old. My mom says, "You wash that off." I can't. I'm going to cut your arm off. Typical Italian mom as you start throwing stuff at me. But anyway, so I like the band so much I tattooed it on my arm. But here's John Anderson. Now, before I do John, I just want a quick blast of Tony again. So here's Tony one more time, real quick.
Josie's on a vacation far away.
Now, here's John Anderson of Yes. Check it out.
Distance. How can the wind with so many around me? I feel lost in the city.
Cool. Now, let's go back quickly here to Tony. Here we go.
Josie's on a vacation far.
Here are the similarities, guys. Check it out. Now, I want to point out that, John Anderson very much would be considered a countertenor or a contratenor, okay? Now, I've heard other people say, well, Dimash is a contratenor and all these other guys, and maybe even Sting is a contratenor because he also sings very flat line and his voice is very high, and Michael Jackson too, but they have too much girth to their voice. There's too much girth to its sound. Remember, it's young, light, bright, agile, all those things, small, and their sounds wouldn't be considered. Maybe there might be elements of it, but it certainly isn't that. Now let me play a couple more things here. These are going to be really interesting. Check this out.
Lost in love and I don't know much. Was I thinking aloud? Fell out of touch, but I'm back on my feet. Eager to be what you wanted.
Now that's Russell Hitchcock. You guys know the band Air Supply, Lost in Love. Now let's quickly listen to that again and A-B that again against Tony. Check it out.
Lost in love and I don't know much. Come around and talk it over. So many things that I wanna say. Eager to be what you wanted.
Okay, now I would say Russell Hitchcock may even be more on the countertenor part because he's even more of a little boy voice and a little higher in pitch. But it's a good example to listen to Tony as we're going through this. Now let's check out another one of these. Check this out.
When the heart rules the mind, one look and love is blind. When you want the dream to last, take a chance, forget the past.
Okay, now what's interesting, that's Max Bacon. Max was in a band called GTR. Now, ironically, the guitar player or the founding member of GTR was the founding member of Yes. So maybe he was looking for a John Anderson sound-alike, so to speak. But let's listen to the three of these guys. So it's kind of interesting. So here's Max Bacon of GTR.
When the heart rules the mind.
John Anderson.
How can the wind with so many
The outfield. Tony Lewis.
You know I like my girls a little bit older.
See the similarities? Now the Altfeld isn't singing as high, and there are some parts in the song that he does, and I'm trying to get it close. It's kind of hard to find them all at the same time. But now let's kind of move on, because I want to talk about other countertenors that have a similar sound.
Really love you, hope you for another day. Or is it just a stop on a lonely highway, baby?
Okay, now that was actually Fran Cosmo, which was in the band Orion, and Orion was the founding member. So, there was the guitar player actually that left the band Boston with a couple other members, and kind of a Boston part two, so to speak, to replace Brad Delp and start a new band called Orion the Hunter, excuse me. That song's called So You Ran. So you hear these really high. Now this is very different than, let's say, a Millie Maticevic from a band Steelheart, who sings heavier. So let's check this out. I think this is it here. Check it out.
Forgive me, girl.
Now, he's got this big, girthy, round, heavy sound. He's definitely a high-range tenor. Maybe he has, some similarities to being a countertenor, but it's very different than what we just heard from Tony and the other guys. There are more of a little boy voice. Now, they sound kind of like little boy voices too, but there's a lot of girth to the sound. Now, I want to keep going down the food chain to some other guys here that I put up here, and we'll get back to Tony, I promise. Okay, now that is a band called Sheriff, right? And the singer his name is Freddie Kirchie. Now I want to play that again really quick. Here we go.
So many things that I wanna say. I like my girls a little bit older.
Right? You hear the similarities there, right? They're very, very, very similar. So check this out again. John Anderson. Hear that? So, all right, so now I want to continue. Now, we know that is Geddy Lee, right? Now, Geddy would definitely fit into this camp of being a contratenor, a countertenor. He has definitely got that really high little boy voice, very small sound. He does use some vibrato. The difference with Geddy is he's singing more like a harder rock guy. There's a lot of doubler on this sound, so it makes it sound bigger than if you'd only heard a single vocal line of his. But I thought it was a good example of a track in a range that he was singing, similar to some of these other guys, that would really showcase kind of that sound. So Geddy, the difference is he leans into his sound a little harder with some distortion. He didn't do that as much later on. And by the way, too, a lot of these guys, they're not using a lot of support. So even Geddy, to this day now, unfortunately, is having some vocal trouble, as were a lot of these guys. But I want to point that out. Now I want to add one more to the pie here. Check this out.
When the heart rules the mind.
Now when you hear this,
One look and love is blind. When you want the dream to land.
that's the difference between Sobre and being light and bright, as opposed to a heavier sound like this.
Forgive me, girl.
Okay, so there were a lot of 80s metal guys that were very heavy on the sound and could drag a lot of weight up from the bottom up to the top. But singers like Brad Delp didn't. Now, I wouldn't consider him so much a countertenor, even though he was light, bright, and airy. His voice wasn't as young and agile sounding in the same kind of way. That could be said of Mickey Thomas, also from the band Starship. He has a big, warm sound, though he had a fantastic range. Definitely sang in the mezzo soprano range, all the way up into the soprano range. His sound was a lot bigger. Okay, a much bigger sound. So let's get back to Tony. He's like, Ken, we're going to do this on Tony Lewis. I am. So here's Tony Lewis one more time.
Josie's on a vacation.
I'm gonna put the band in now.
Come around and talk it just wanna use your love tonight.
So do you guys see the precision of this sound? All of his stuff is really precise. And if you listen to the Sheriff stuff, or you listen to, even John Anderson, some of the other guys, they're as precise, but not quite as precise as Tony. And that's one of the things I really loved about his voice a lot. Now let's continue, because I have some other comments I'd like to make along the way.
I don't wanna lose your love tonight.
Did you hear how exact the background vocals were? They almost sounded like a mellotron, or they almost sounded like auto-tune, but this was before the age of auto-tune, folks. So those vocals are spot on, and they don't use vibrato, so there's not a lot of waver in the sound. They're just really, really, really tight in the way that they were sung. So, listen.
I ain't got many friends left to talk to. Where's the room when I'm in trouble? You know I'd do anything for you. Stay the night but keep it undercover. I just wanna use your love tonight.
Listen to these backgrounds. Check this out.
Whoa. I don't wanna lose your love tonight.
Hear how beautiful and spot on those vocals are, and they're really pristine. Now, a few more things about this is that if you notice, there's a little bit of more of an airy tone or tonal quality to a countertenor. So it's not like, hey, it's hey, right? There's a lot of airs, so that's why it's light, bright, kind of airy, small, agile, and young, and therein comes the idea and the concept of being Sabre. So let's continue to listen to his vocal alone just to enjoy it here for a minute. Here we go, it's gonna come up.
Trying to stop my hands from shaking, but something in my mind's not making sense.
Just not trying to stop my hands from shaking, right? Now if you notice, that's kind of on the higher spectrum for me until I get warmed up and try to get into my upper register as a high Barry. But for him, it sounds really low in his register. Check it out.
It's been a while since we were all alone. I can hide the way I'm feeling. As you're leaving, please would you close the door? And don't forget what I told you.
Now, there's one more thing about this that I want to bring up, and that is that there is a slurring through the consonants for these smaller Sabre kinds of sounds, because they're so articulate already, because they're a smaller sound and they're placed so high that they don't have to articulate the sound. Now, this is precisely what I cover all of this stuff in my singing course, that when you're up this high, you don't really want to over accentuate the vocal tract. So we don't want vowels being too big going from one vowel to another. And we actually slur through the consonant sounds themselves, because we don't want to get caught with the throat closing, opening and closing and opening and closing, trying to sing these words. So listen closely how he kind of slurs through these words. Check.
And don't forget what I told you. Just cause you're right, that don't mean I'm wrong.
Just because you're right don't mean I'm wrong. Just because you're right don't mean I'm wrong. It's just because you're right don't mean I'm wrong. Right? Check it out. Listen closely, man. Did you know that's what he was saying?
Just cause you're right, that don't mean I'm wrong. Another shoulder to cry upon.
Did you know? Another shoulder to cry upon. Right? He doesn't veer off that much from that vowel sound. So that O, A, E, O is very closely related all the way through the full spectrum of the range that he's singing in. So it's very important to note that when you're singing this high, no matter if you're a Barry like me, if you're a tenor, a contratenor, and even sopranos, when they go up in their range, they have to do the same thing, okay?
I just want to use your love tonight.
So anyway, I just wanted to share all this stuff with you guys. It was really exciting for me to want to be able to do all this. This is a very particular vocal type I've been wanting to do for a while now. And I really appreciate you guys joining me, and definitely check out my next video.